With PRB02 finally releasing and several cards entering into the meta and a whole October of different online events, in-person regionals in this format, it's time to discuss some of the top decks, some sleeper picks, and much more. I'm only going to be ranking leaders within this list on Cardi Kaizoku's website that I feel are something that I could probably bring to a championship, and I feel like I'm pretty known for playing obscure decks, so there's a good amount of variety. Anyways, before we get into that, let's hear from our sponsor in this video. Listen, if you're a fan of the Three Brothers or Zoro, or
maybe, I don't know, you just need a new, cool, awesome playmat,
let me tell you about Nengarden, the sponsor of this video. I've been telling you lately about the King of Hearts and Cotton Candy playmats, but they've got brand new pre-orders. The Chaos Crew, which is a lovely illustration of the Three Stooges in the One Piece franchise, but also this incredible looking Green Fury illustration on this playmat. While you're getting your playmat, you can also get great items like the King of Hearts tee, plenty of stickers, and brand new pins. Use code Atrocious to save 8% off your order to help support the channel and also a good friend. Thank you, Nengarden, for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to it. I think I'm going to start off with getting the top decks that haven't really changed from OP12 out of the way first. First, I'm going to talk about Zoro, right? Just a great deck, even get some new additions in PRB02 in that new blocker. Just a nice searchable option for like the mirror match or Usohachi, right? Blue Purple Luffy emerged, especially through Cardfest, as still a very competitive and viable deck, building it within some flexibility of new tech cards like White Snake. Still a big fan of this guy in the format, even if in OP13 he falls down a little bit, still a strong contender. Rayleigh is still considered the top aggro deck of the format, right? Just being able to have so many bodies so fast and be able to power up those bodies so easily to hit so aggressively while also having a fair amount of like removable, unblockable, etc. premieres it as a powerful deck within the format. Even though he's one of the only decks in these top decks that don't actually gain anything from PRB02, the archetype itself is still strong enough to be successful. I'm also going to keep Bonnie up here as well within the top decks, just like I did in OP12. It is still a very strong deck, and OP12 did show how there's so many people playing it and how good it can be. Especially because Bonnie also gets that 3-drop Bonnie here in PRB02 to more actively get their leader effect, especially on curve and now on the odd curve as well. You're just going to keep seeing Bonnie be successful within this format and still be present, especially in a lot of top cuts. This is what I would imagine to be like the 4 of the top 5 decks within the format. But now let's get into some other stuff. Just because I've been talking about a lot of Rosinante lately, I'll put Rosinante in the missing One Piece category. He's really cool and actually decently viable. You just gotta dodge UP Luffy. I mean, you beat the green decks, but I mean, it was me in the LCQ. I just ran into so many blue purple Luffys and not enough decks like Bonnie that I just fell through the ranks. The other deck that I'm moderately obsessed with right now, Zoro Sanji, right? Especially because we saw it get that 2nd place finish in Zagreb, has premiered itself to be a really cool aggro deck within the format. I'm not 100% sure if that Zoro, just like in the green Zoro, is something that you do want to include in the deck, but it provides some interesting scenarios within deck building, and I still think it can be pretty successful within this format because I don't know if this format changes too much that like it changes your perspective on your matchups. I'm going to give a big shout out to the Luffy that made top 16 in the Brisbane regionals. Was actually really cool of a deck, and I'm excited to try it out and show you guys in this list, especially with some potential stuff in the future. But I think it's kind of missing something in an essence to get it that consistent one. It's like the missing One Piece category are the decks that can make top cut, but it's insanely difficult. But if they do, you're really shocked by it. Cool top cut are more so ones of like, they don't make top cut every single tournament, but especially once builds are found and become more popular, that's when you see them come through the ranks. I'm going to move not only Katakuri, but also Pudding within the cool top cut category for pretty much the same exact reason for that new Charlotte Pudding card. We recently even saw in the Chinos Cup that Pudding had a really good showing within that small event. Just being able to refill the hand, but also play down the 8-drop Katakuri or another great body within the deck is so strong and can lead to so many good possibilities. It's a deck that I I think a lot of people are going to be interested and trying out, and I'm excited to see if it can make some noise within this format. Staying on the purple decks, though, let's just talk about Purple Luffy real quick. Not only could you potentially play the new 2-cost Nami to be able to maybe replace Trafalgar Law, right? And be able to dig in the top 5 for a Straw Hat crew, but you're also kind of the same deck as you were before, right? Still some pretty strong showing, still some good matchups, right? You can still play 9-drop Lin, you can still play 8-cost Katakuri within your deck and still run amok against some decks. Calgara getting a ton more viability within the format, not because he's gained anything in PRB02, but just because his matchup spread is looking better and better. Especially in OP12, we've started to see this guy appear more and more, not every time, but more and more in top cuts of different regionals and events, and I think that trend is going to continue within the PRB02 format. Just being able to be extremely aggressive, right? Cheat those bodies out early with some potential to do some healing in the Kuma and also the Mont Black Norlin lead to some incredible possibilities within this deck. Speaking of yellow, though, Koala had a really cool top 4 finish within the Brisbane regionals. It was the first breakout performance that the deck has had, but I don't necessarily, especially because I don't know the matchups that the Koala player had. And feel free to let me know down in the description below if you do know. I haven't seen the person like on Twitter or anything like that. I think the deck is missing just a couple different pieces to really break out in something that we can more consistently see in the top cut, because especially once you know what Koala's leader effect does, you can start playing around it a little bit more, making it slightly more ineffective. Speaking of yellow, Trafalgar Law still in there, right? And still has some aggressiveness to it that it had previously in the OP11 format. But as I've been saying, just the widespread kind of jungle that we're in is just not very favorable towards green-yellow Law. But if you hit the right bracket, right, dodging the Zoro or whatever, facing a lot of blue-purple Luffys, your chances are pretty good, especially now because blue-purple Luffy doesn't even have healing options. Dofi, I think, can excel a little bit more in a centralized format, but as of right now, with just so much variety, the Jinbei Searcher is very good within the deck, but not great enough to see it consistently in a top cut. It wouldn't surprise me if at least one tournament within this October month we see one make a top, but for now I think we're just gonna have to wait a little bit. For mono blue, though, Kuzan is still a good deck within the cool top cut category, right? Just an excellent deck to play, very fun. I feel like in Kuzan, though, there's just not a lot of variety. It's very predictable of what you're going to do, especially when you start getting towards those later turns of like 8 or 6. You're going to Tashigi on 1, you're gonna send Goku on 3. 5, you're probably gonna play like Borsalino. 7, you'll either play Kuzan or Sakazuki, depending on what's a better option, maybe a Kuzan, and then you're going to play Garp from every turn on. Potentially, maybe once your board fills, throw a Gravity Blade in there or something. Kuzan can still make some noise and do a lot of damage, and especially in these plethora of regionals, you'll see multiple of them throughout the various month. I'm actually really excited for Lim also. I feel like lately we've started to see Lim pop up a lot more, especially with the introduction in OP12 of the Bonnie. It's starting to add some things that are unconventional to the deck that I'm really starting to like. I think Lim also did really well in the PRB02 Chinos Cup lately, so who knows, maybe the Europeans will crack Lim once again and we can see it get another regional victory. Bello Betty's stock did rise, especially with blue-purple Luffy not falling by the wayside, but it's definitely not in its top deck category as it used to be. Or I should say, as the premier aggro or counter pick. Bello Betty is still very explosive and can do some damage, so we've seen it in top cuts through this last month. And again, even though it's not getting anything in PRB02, it's still a strong deck that is very good. And one that if you're not careful of, it's going to blast you. I'm going to put Shanks down here in the missing one piece category. A lot of people were hyping up Shanks heading into the OP12 format. Absolutely got rocked. But I will say the additions of Trafalgar Law and Kobe are very nice within the deck, and even the Lucky Roo. Shanks getting basically 3 new cards is some of the best that we've seen in terms of additions into a single deck heading into this upcoming format, but I'm not 100% convinced that that is going to be enough to sway some of these matchups that you're going to have to deal with that have kept you by the wayside. I feel like I could be convinced to put Shanks up here with a little bit of more testing and like some watching more games of the new deck list, but I think for now I'm going to keep it safe and put it in this category. I don't think you would put it any higher than this category right here. Speaking of the deck that got some new cards in that new Kobe card, Kobe I think is just missing one piece. He's barely hanging on, and I will acknowledge the addition, but this would probably be the most surprising deck I feel like to make a top cut that I've got on this tier list personally. I think Purple Black Luffy's in here too. You really like to see the 2-drop Nami that got added, but I feel like it's honestly kind of a bit linear. I feel like it's just viable enough that you can take it to events and you can have some success more so at the local level, but at the big events that I've seen it at or paired up against, it just doesn't get there. It is definitely a cool deck though, do not get me wrong. I love the leader effect and also being able to +1 everything on the board can help in a lot of different matchups, but you're just not there yet. We saw Reiju make a top finish. I believe it was the European regionals, maybe Seville, and Reiju's a fine deck still at this point. There's a variety of different ways to do it. I know that Seville list that I saw running several of the new Ichiji blockers, but still kind of runs that core package that it's been using, especially when you have a favorable matchup into blue purple Luffy. Maybe that's all you really need, and especially for that Seville player, I think he faced like 5 blue purple Luffys, which is awesome for Reiju in a 9-round Swiss. I'll give Buggy a little bit of merit. I feel like lately we've started to see Buggy a couple more times in the OP12 format, and Buggy gets that new Mr. 3 that I think is a pretty good card. People are utilizing that. Buggy, one of the cheapest decks to play if you're balling on a budget to be able to utilize, just needs to see a couple certain matchups to really break its way through. And especially when they high roll, man, when Buggy high rolls, it's tough. I'll throw in Vegapunk and also get Yamato in there in this missing one piece category. Good decks within their own right, and I think have some placements to be untold. But like Vegapunk's waiting until 13, and Yamato, if they can't win within the first couple turns of the game, I feel like it all falls apart. I'll get Katakuri in there as well. I think Katakuri had a pretty good showing at one of the regionals, or was it Bandai Card Fest? And especially with the different burn potentials, something might be there with it. I'm a little cautious for the rest of this format now that something has been showcased. Like, can it do better than what it did at Card Fest, or really build upon that without, you know, people figuring it out or countering it and whatnot? Time will have to tell on it. Lucci, man, every time y'all forget about Lucci tops some regional or whatever, has some insane showing. Now, he did have a pretty free matchup in the finals in the Zoro Sanji, but until Emu comes out, Lucci is still a force to be reckoned with, right? Being able to build up the trash, now has access to that PRB02 Sabo, right, as a very good utility 2K. This might be so much as Lucci's last ride for the foreseeable future within the format, but until then, it wouldn't surprise me to face one in one of the online regionals or the in-person regional that I'm playing in this month. Speaking of mono black though, Blackbeard I still think is a pretty viable deck, especially getting the new Shiryu. Now, I don't think that the Shiryu is like a 4 of staple within the deck, but being able to get that 4 cost, have blocker on it, as well as I believe it gets a cost addition to it as well if you're playing it in Teach, and have that on KO effect can be good in a lot of different matchups, right? In theory, this helps the Rayleigh matchup, right? Giving it a blocker and then being able to KO a character on the field on the Rayleigh side can really help as they try to swarm and overwhelm you. You can also get a couple different bodies with that guy as well, and especially with Gianni doing really well in the Treasure Cup, I think it was, winning the event with it. I think Blackbeard still got a placement within this meta. It's just like some of these other decks like this, it's super technical, and you really kind of know what you're doing. I think Kid is up there as like a cool top cut deck. It's not overly glamorous, right? But it did get some new additions in that promo law now being reprinted and much more plentiful in PRB02. And a lot of times with 8 cost Kid just being so strong and different other great bodies like the 4 cost Basil Hawkins, the 7 drop Law, maybe even playing something like Kuma. Like there's a lot that you might have to deal with within this deck, pretty much almost getting blocker every single turn. And once they get those 9K blockers, stuff like that on the field, it's really tough to get around. I think Nami is still, not that high. Nami is still a nice card to be running around within the format, and I'm excited to see it heading into this month in the full swing of now having Starter Deck 22, of now having some really cool lists that fly around as of late. There's a lot of exploring to be done, not only with this leader, right? I think there was like one that topped in this past weekend playing like a full-on Wano package, which is incredibly cool to see. I think there's a lot to build upon with Nami, especially because you can become a 7K leader with any of your cards in hand for an entire turn. That's really helpful in a lot of different matchups. Sanji, I think, is in there too. I think Sanji is a cool deck and very fun to play. Now, I don't think you gain anything in PRB02 unless maybe you want to play the 2-drop Nami Searcher, because a lot of your vents are Straw Hat Crew. So that paired up with the Sanji makes it searchable. I don't know if you replace that over the pudding, but there's a lot of cool ways that you can mess with this deck, and it wouldn't surprise me to see 1 or 2 of them make top cuts over the course of this next month in this format. Now, I'm still pretty high on, not that high. I'm still pretty high on Enel. I think Enel is just a good deck, right? Are you able to respond with all the constant healing, all of the constant removal as well, and the pressure that he can put on? There's a good amount of decks that honestly just can't really deal with that. And there are other decks where you have to see a certain set of pieces to be able to win that matchup. Enel, very similar to how I feel about with Teach and Zoro Sanji, has an incredibly high ceiling that's hard to face. You better watch out if you're not hoping to see an Enel this upcoming format. Sakazuki, I think, is in this category of missing one piece. We've seen it had a couple different brief stints of appearances within top cuts, but I think in general the consensus to the community is that Sakazuki just doesn't hit the numbers that it used to. If you want to play like a pure removal deck like Sakazuki, just play Rob Lucci instead. There are some cool things about it though, and those Sakazuki players are diehard, so they can make a run or two in a tournament, but I feel like I'm surprised more often than not when I see a Sakazuki in those top tables. Now, this might be my more spicier pick, but I'm going to put Black Yellow Luffy in this category of leaders. I think a lot of people in this next month are going to be playing Black Yellow Luffy and trying to make it work with that new ace. The new ace is a great addition, don't get me wrong, and it definitely puts up the power level of the deck. And I think a lot of people who really liked playing Black Yellow Luffy previously in its heyday are going to try to go back to it, at least, especially for the online events, because the online events, you know, you have people playing whatever they want. It wouldn't surprise me to see Black Yellow Luffy in this next month make an appearance or two within top cuts. Coming up on the tail end of the leaders, I'm going to throw Gecko in here. Gecko has a little bit of everything, right? Gecko has hand control, Gecko has removal, Gecko even has double attack, and very aggressive strategies trying to cheat out these characters. It wouldn't surprise me to see a top cut of Gecko within this next month, but any more than one, I would be a little shocked, I'm not going to lie. Gecko is very cool, and it's no surprise that the new Gecko Moria is definitely an addition to the deck and definitely something that spices things up, increases its power level, but I don't think enough to where you really have to start metagaming for it. Ace and Whitebeard I'm also going to throw in this tier. I think it's got a pretty good core of stuff that's in there, and especially being able to cheat out something like 10 cost Whitebeard, not from OP13. The OP13 10 cost Whitebeard is very, very good, but Taxbeard could be really, really nice for some matchups like Rayleigh. Being able to filter and have really good draw, especially with the PRB02 Marco right within your deck, is definitely a huge upgrade. And honestly, I mean, Vampire Gaming, if you make top cut, man, I'm the one that's cheering for you. Speaking of really cool decks that I've seen lately, Sanji doing really cool things. This is all pretty much based in the Chinos Cup, but looking at that deck list, seeing the new Kobe and the Trafalgar Law in there are great cards to have within the deck to be able to give them rush, right? Sanji being able to give non-on-play effect cards of an 8 or less rush, which, by the way, that Trafalgar Law doesn't have an on-play effect. Especially because you beat out some decks like these two probably right here just because of your extreme aggression. I'm really curious if some people try to take this deck through some of like the onlines and the regionals that we got to see if they can really make this snap. I'm probably going to be making a video here in the next couple days about Sanji in general in the PRB02 format, so look out for that on the channel if you're interested. Moving on into the last two decks, speaking of the Trafalgar Law and Kobe, it's no secret that the best addition for those two cards is in Smoker. Smoker becoming a very viable deck heading into this format. I don't know if I'd put it in the top decks. It is very close. If anything, if I was going to like rank these in order, this deck is floating in between these two categories right here. But I have seen time and time again how if you just don't find the 5-cost Smoker, you just flat out lose. With some of these other decks, low rolling, you still have some potential for comeback just based on how your deck is piloted. But it feels like with Smoker, there is no chance if you low roll, like you have just lost. You'll definitely see Smoker way more within the top cuts and running amok within the top tables, and we may even see a regional win with this Smoker. And the last deck that I'm going to talk about is GP Luffy. I think this deck is really, really good. I was a little bit underrating it in heading into the OP12 format, but seeing it perform, and then on top of that, getting some good new cards in the PRB02 format, like this is definitely a top deck in my opinion. I think these 5 are going to round out like the most regional wins, the most top cuts across this entire short 1 month meta that we have, and especially because I think there is some really cool skill expression in green purple Luffy. Top players just play the deck, man. And that's going to be all. That's going to be the tier list. Remember that it's opinionated, so if you're butthurt about anything, well, that's a problem for you. I'm really excited to see what this PRB02 format brings because it's much more exciting than the PRB01 format in my opinion, simply because we get many more new cards introduced and kind of changes up the format a little bit. We're still in a very diverse meta up until OP13, and make sure to check out the channel soon for more content. My name is Jake. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.